You're listening to Tambora Dialogues, where we honor our rich Latin ancestral wisdom and renativize ourselves in the drum circle. I am your host, Erasma Veras Monticholo. Familia, as many of you know, Election Day in the United States is next week, November 8th, which really marks the first national election since the presidential election in 2020. And so these elections, which are called the midterms because they arrive almost just about, I think, 2 years into a president's term, are very important because right now all 435 seats in the House of Representatives and 35 seats in the Senate are being contested. And so whichever party wins the majority can either derail or advance the president's agenda. And that's just, as we know, at the federal level. There are also like 36 elections or something like that for governor and other offices at the local government levels as well. And so all that to say is that it's a big election year in the US. And so today we're bringing you this special voting edition of Tambora Dialogues. And it's us, it's the Tambora family, Maria Nieto, who's our executive producer, George Torres, our creative director, and me, your host. And we're going to have real talk, right, about what we're seeing, what we're feeling, what we're hearing and doing for this upcoming election. So Maria, George, welcome to the drum circle, even though you all are always here, right, as contributors and creators. We're the dream team. But George, this is your first time actually, on camera. And Maria, this is your second time, right?
Second time, yeah.
Yes. She was on the pilot episode.
That's right.
Yeah, I wanted to jump out from behind the curtain, so to speak, because as somebody who raised children of color in this country, I don't see things getting better. When I started my career as a online communicator, digital storyteller, my biggest passion was fighting for police brutality because of my background and what happened to me. I was a victim of a racial incident in the 80s that was all over the news. That was a big deal in New York City. And when the police responded to my incident, they actually threw us up against the wall, even though the perpetrators were 20 feet away from us. And it was because of the fact that even though I present white, my Dominican friend and I, we were dressed like what you dressed like when you were from Brooklyn. You know what I mean? So we were very visibly not from that neighborhood, right? And that hasn't changed. And one of the reasons why I always hypothesized why it didn't change was because of 9/11. 9/11 was a very big step back for us as people and accountability in the community, because we had an issue with police brutality in New York specifically. We had it all over the country, but in New York, we were getting somewhere with this, right? We had the appointment of the community review board. We had all these things happening simultaneously. Then 9/11 happens, and every cop is a hero. It wiped the slate clean, and it took 10 years for us to start seeing the same level of complaints come out to the light. And now with video and social media, seeing actual visual evidence of police brutality beyond what people just witnessed in their communities. So I see that a lot of things have stepped backwards. Everything seems to be going backwards in a lot of ways. So that's kind of like the reason why I wanted to step out here today, is because I see a lot of the stuff that I was fighting for in college all of a sudden be very, very front and present with us today. And I'm concerned. I'm concerned about, a lot of things, but a straight racial war is really at the top of mind. Like I think that this country is nosediving into that space.
Yeah. And I'd say that for me, I'm seeing my country fall into a free fall of fascism. And as a woman, olvídate, we're already second-class citizens for all intents and purposes. So this to me, and I don't think there's ever been a more pivotal election cycle than this one. I think everything that we are hangs in the balance. Our courts, our rights, women's rights, gender rights and racial voting, everything right now, I think at this point hangs in the balance. I don't think there's ever been a more important election in our lifetime, to be honest with you. short of getting Trump out, of course, right? But that
Right.
was the beginning of the fight, and I think this is the second half of the fight. And I don't know that I'm scared, to be honest with you.
Yeah, no, and I agree with both of you. I mean, I have very profound memories of being a kid, arriving in New York City, in the early 1980s, and immediately being thrust into the politics of what was happening in the 80s in the States, right, with Ronald Reagan, et cetera. The war on drugs, and this time for me is it's also very reminiscent of that time, of the high tension, of the anxiety, of the lack of just the insecurity, right, that I'm feeling about where the nation is headed, and the division that exists between so many people, right? And George, you were talking about this earlier, that we all as humans have one driving force. So we want to do well for ourselves. We want our children and our children's children, the generations, to do well. And so our main goal is for our immediate circle to thrive. But even that, though, I think is being challenged, and it's being challenged very profoundly at a level that is so insidious, and used to be insidious, now is quite overt.
Yeah.
Right. And even those moments of euphoria, right? I felt a lot of euphoria this past weekend when, obviously learning about the election in Brazil, and I was like, yes, I can see that the inclusive movements can actually work. But then I log onto Twitter and I read news about, the elections in Israel. Then I read about, the national U.S. polls, and all of that euphoria is just gone. Is gone. And then I don't know if you all heard, but New York Times just had a breaking news headline that Donald Trump is expected to announce that he's running again for president on the 14th of November. Did you all hear that?
No.
Yeah. How do you react to that? What is your reaction? What are your thoughts?
It makes me scared because despite the fact that we over-index as people of color in this country, what is it, the majority, minority, whatever, it's always astonishing to me that all these elections come down to such a narrow margin when we outnumber them, and I don't know where we're missing the is it keyboard warriors? Because one of the things that really bothers me, and I talked about this a dozen times online, is the fact that people put so much time and energy into their Facebook posts and their propaganda, whatever they feel and they believe in, whether it's our side or their side, doesn't matter.
Right.
People put so much energy into that, but they don't put it into things that are actionable. There's a lot of energy in just this stuff that just basically just helps program the people around us, right? They just see it over and over again until it becomes true, whichever side it's on, and nobody's really taking action. But the people that are actually having these conversations or that are putting this content out, they really feel like they're doing something, and they are doing something, but they're not doing anything to help.
Yeah.
They're just it's a lot of noise and a lot of pollution.
Yeah.
It's information pollution, as far as I'm concerned. So I get really concerned when people put, and this is in every space, even in work group chats that I've worked with in companies past or whatever. It's when people spend so much time complaining about the problem that they don't put any energy into the solution.
Yeah.
And that, from a social media perspective, that's what really kind of like scares the shit out of me,
Yeah. And so, George, to that point, I'm curious, like, with so much information out there coming at us from, different directions, like, how do you, George, do your due diligence about candidates? Like, how are you preparing for election day?
Well, interestingly enough, I'm very political in my personal life, but because I manage a brand and also the companies that I own, I actually manage brands as well. I don't really comment too much on things. I commented quite a bit on Black Lives Matter because it's something that mattered to me. But I don't get into the political debate space online. I say how I feel. I say how it impacts me in my personal space online, but I don't engage in debating my points. I say how I feel, and I kind of leave it at that. But I read things, and there's days that I jump on news networks that don't have our best interest in heart, just to see, just to understand what it is that these people are being programmed with. I want to know what the threat is, you know. Um, and I guess later on we can talk a little bit about what Elon Musk taking over Twitter means for us. But
Yeah.
that's a big topic in the tech space, right?
Yeah.
Is what kind of access? What is that branded version of free speech look like when it comes to this pollution that we have online, with people just spewing out things and not being held accountable for truth?
Yeah, misinformation, disinformation, it's all out there. So trying to figure out, like, how do you distinguish between what's real and what's not, right? So Maria, the same question to you, like, how are you engaging in your own due diligence, and how are you using what you're learning to help inform others who may not have, the same level of access, maybe because there are language barriers, etc.
I want to circle back to your first question about Trump running for office and how do I feel.
Yeah.
Honestly, I feel like he has Horcruxes everywhere and Voldemort is back. Not even like, por Dios. Like,
Maria got that Harry Potter reference in there.
I love Harry Potter, and I'm like, that's it, man. The Death Eaters are around, and like seriously, like part of me was like, what? And then how do I engage? And I'm gonna, like, full transparency here. I'm a party voter, because I don't think I'm not gonna parse out the candidates at this point. There's two teams, and I've always been very clear personally about, we are in a two-party system, and as long as we're in a two-party system, yes, absolutely, we need to build a progressive arm. We need to build a three-party system, four-party system. I get it, but until we do, we're in a two-party system, and I don't make any bones about the fact that I vote blue, because that right now is the party that represents not all of my values and what I stand for, but most of them, right? And we're in a battle for the soul of this country, for our own personal lives, the people that I love, because if we do not win this, gay rights goes out the window. Marginalized communities are going to be further punished. We're already at a disadvantage. As a Latina, I'm like, we saw what happened with the wall. We saw what happened with the kids being, detained at the border and ripped from their parents. We've already gotten a taste of the horrors of fascism, and we've seen our neighbors that we thought were so nice, that were so pleasant, and then they'll vote for the most heinous things and then not even be apologetic for it. So ya me llené with my little taste of fascism under 4 years of Trump, and I make no bones about it that we're in the fight of our lives.
But isn't it scary? Isn't it scary that people that we love, that we feel should know better about certain things, just come at you with, like, literally what Rasmus was talking about, the disinformation? That's the type of stuff that I hear people tell me. It just boggles me. It's just like, did you go to history class? Like, do you know, like, I mean, not that history class is the is the model, right? Because
depends on what school you went to, right?
It depends on what school you went to, but to hear people just like spew out things that they heard in passing, or they heard other people talk about without really knowing facts, and then somehow convincing themselves that that's the way to go. That's scary to me. That's really scary to me. That people don't even have the time to personally invest in making sure that their families are going to be safe.
But I also think, George, that, thinking about, my parents' generation, who were staunch, I mean, my family, staunch Democrats, still Democrats, they vote based on party line, right? And so even, like, my friends' families and my husband's family, they vote Republican because that's all they know. So they are not necessarily really paying attention to the actual issues, right? Because they don't see it how it hurts others. They're just thinking about, this is what I know. This is how I voted. This is the party that allowed me to raise my kids, and so I'm going to keep voting in that way. And so I think what I've been hearing and seeing, this is how I do my due diligence. I read everything. I read everything. I listen to everything. I even watch Fox News. I listen to it all. And what gives me hope is that, our generation, so Generation X, Generation Z, Generation, millennials, alpha, whatever they're called, that they're thinking differently, right? And that, although they didn't show up for Hillary, they showed up for the Biden-Harris ticket.
Yeah.
Right. And so it seems as though they're showing up now, and they're showing up now because they feel like what you mentioned before, Maria, that government is infringing on their rights.
Yeah.
Right? On their equal rights, right? So they're thinking about LGBTQ community, thinking about, the BIPOC community. They're thinking about, some of them, most of them actually, are very pro, debt cancellations, student loan cancellation, right? And so these are things that are really a big part of the Biden-Harris administration that they're for. So I am hopeful that, the younger generation is going to show up this midterm, right? Particularly, young people of color.
Yeah.
I don't know if you all are feeling that too.
I do, because I think a lot of the conversations online have been about people seeing each other, right? Seeing each other for their disabilities, for their, for their color of their skin, their religious beliefs, etc. And that conversation is super present, and that side they don't acknowledge most of that. You know what I mean? So that's that's super restrictive. So this is one of those cases where the kid that thinks he knows better, right? I understand the world from a different perspective, Mom. Let me do my thing, Mom.
Yeah.
I think that generation is really going to step in. I hope it's enough for what we're dealing with right now. That's really where.
Yeah.
Is it enough for right now?
Well, I mean, it was enough to get Biden and Harris elected, right? They helped to push that, that ticket over the hurdle, right? So, my hope is that they show up for the midterms, which generally folks don't. But, what I'm seeing is that, so far there are 21 million, votes that are in, like 21 million early votes that have been tallied, at least as of, Wednesday of this past week. So my hope is that they are showing up.
That's my hope too. Maybe I'm being a little cynical. I'm like, so I guess, full disclosure, but I guess with the youngins, I'm like, keyboard warriors. I'm like, it's great on TikTok, but you got to take the day, man. You got to go to the polls, because that's where it counts. And that is where the viejito Republicans sometimes have it all over on us, right? Because they're
going out. Trust me, they're going out.
Yeah. I'll tell you this bit, right? Because, of course, I'm a geek. I love polls. And I was reading a poll that was conducted by the Harvard Public Opinion Project, this like student, led polling group within the university's Institute of Politics. And, they found that actually the young people are really showing up this year, that they're eager to show up because of all the things that we just mentioned, right? The student loan debt cancellation, climate action, reproductive rights. What else were they talking about? Oh, Inflation Reduction Act. So all of these things are really important to them. Mm-hmm. And so this generation is really actively talking about how to engage. And so much so that it has driven a lot of them to actually register as Democrats.
Oh, good.
In larger numbers.
But question, to both of you. Do you think that the party is actually taking that feedback, taking those numbers, those polls into consideration, and finding ways to really engage with them? Because I still see the same thing. I still see the same pandering where I'm going to go to a soccer game and take a picture with a little young brown boy, and I'm gonna go to their fiesta. I'm going to go to the Day of the Dead festival. I don't think that the political parties. I think that the Democratic Party has a very specific audience that they're not really attending to. They're being lazy about it, and I think that the other party is using the rhetoric of hate very effectively to get people to rally against the blue party during the election. You get what I'm saying? Like I feel like they tapped into their authentic voice. I mean, they really tapped into their authentic voice, and I don't think that the Democratic side has done that.
But you know what? Here's what I think. I think part of it also, and I'm hoping that the younger voters get this. Look, the Democratic Party is basically like talking to your grandpa. Is grandpa going to get social media? Is he on Facebook and knows how to use it? No. Okay. So has his politicking style changed since like the 1940s? Tampoco. But what do you do? Like, do you throw grandpa under the bus, or do you say kind of like, listen, that's part of also understanding, right? Like understanding different perspectives, age gaps. Yeah, you're right. The party isn't savvy. It doesn't know how to talk to the constituents they absolutely need to reach. But I'm hoping that there's a kindness and compassion and a sense of like shared urgency with the younger voters, that they're like, look, I get it. You know, could they be doing this? Could they be doing that? But we're on the same team, and that's really what it's going to come down to.
Yeah, but they even think about all the coverage that AOC generated, right, when she came on the scene.
Yeah,
that was they should have looked at that and said, you know what, we need more of that. We need to support that, and even the infighting and even other Democratic candidates like shitting on her doesn't help because she has the attention of young people. So why not like capitalize on that and say, you know what? Let's get more young people in front of the camera. Let's source different candidates instead of these candidates that have been around, like they're incumbent and they've been in the same space, not doing anything for how long.
But I think AOC is the perfect example of what I'm talking about, because you're absolutely right. She knows she's being, that her own team is coming at her, but I don't really see her break rank. She gets the fact that while we're in this fight, I stand with Pelosi, and she has stood at pivotal times because the cause was bigger than what was happening to her, and she chose to look past it. So I actually do see her as sort of like the harbinger of what I'm hoping is the case on Tuesday.
And who's next?
I think that goes to an earlier point that you made, Maria, about the interconnectedness, right, of the Latina community, right? That we understand, like, even if we have our own individual priorities, we understand that community really matters. And AOC is proving that by saying, okay, I don't always agree with, the old time Democrats, but I understand what's priority right now and what's important for our people, what's important for our society. And so I'm going to stand firm with them in this moment. And, to what you were saying, George, I've seen Biden and Harris reach out to influencers, TikTok influencers, Instagram influencers. They have Selena Gomez out there campaigning and doing that. So they are trying. It's just that maybe they themselves, the older politicians haven't yet mastered how to navigate the platforms, but they certainly have identified ambassadors to help them get the message out. So they're trying.
It depends on who the ambassadors are too, because then you have a situation where you have influencers that really don't know what they're talking about, or that don't have a firm grasp on a particular issue, and they're out there just saying to do it. That may work to a certain extent, but you want people who are qualified. And for me, the best people would be like the interns that work in the White House, like the young people that are coming up that are going to be the next leadership in the next 10, 20 years. Those are the people that I want to hear from. I want to hear what it's like. That authenticity of what Washington, D.C. is really like would, I think, do wonders for this cause. If you're talking about equality, equity, unity, all those things that we want, I think that would help to have the younger voices of Washington, D.C. really step up.
And I'm going to put in a plug for our community también, because, so to the DNC, if you're listening, work with Latinos, because we know how to work with our viejitos. We don't, what I'm saying? We get it. We go like arm in arm. So we're your best resource and have been for a long time.
That's right. The extended family. I mean, I think you both raise a very good point that, George, what you were saying, that ambassadors can do but so much, right? But having someone who's informed within, the system that is Washington, D.C., and can share that insight could be incredibly helpful and beneficial in terms of, more deeply connecting younger voters to get activated. Although they're getting there. So, again, I'm still incredibly hopeful.
It's a process, but like I said, my thing is that time is our worst enemy right now, because like how much time do we have and how many resources we have to really reach out to those communities? Not only that, do we have the resources to even fight all the voter suppression stuff that's happening?
Yeah.
That's a big deal, because there's whole communities that are hopeless. They have no hope whatsoever that their votes are going to be counted because there's militias outside of the voting booths. Like that's a real thing. There's posts up in the Midwest and down south where people have no hope of getting their votes counted.
Yeah.
And we don't have
what's interesting? Yeah, what's interesting, that you just said was that it reminds me of I lived in Costa Rica for some time, and I happened to be there for the elections. Gosh, this was like in the early 2000s, right? So 2002 or so. And what was really incredible, and Costa Rica is like so progressive.
Yes.
Like they're just ahead of the curve on so many things. And, and obviously there's some things that they need to work in terms of their, indigenous community. And so, hello, Costa Rica, we talk about that. But then on getting the vote out, on ensuring that there is no voter suppression, on really galvanizing the community to support and mobilize each other, right? Regardless of what party you're affiliated with or what you believe in, there are buses that show up, right, at your door and are like, let's go, we're going to go vote. We don't care who you're voting for. We want you to go out there and vote. And they stand there and they wait until everybody votes and then ship them back, bring them back to their homes. And it's a way of ensuring that, one, people go and actually, vote, but two, to make sure that there's no voter suppression that is happening. And three, they're ensuring that everyone's voice is represented.
Yeah.
Right? That it's inclusive. And I think that there's something to be said about mobilizing resources to help us do that in a more constructive way in the US, which I never even would have thought we would need that. But now with all that's happening and that, the Voting Act is like in jeopardy, it's like, oh yes, we do need it.
Yeah.
And so
or go the other way too. Like, like if we know that there's a physical threat, right, in a particular community where people to go out, then the DNC should really be like, okay, well, let's do absentee ballots. Let's make sure that we get absentee ballots in everybody's hands. Let's coach them how it works, how to fill them out. They make their own choices. Doesn't matter what their choices are, but let's educate them on how to get these ballots in so that they don't have to worry about being in a crossfire of something that's an outlier in the community. So I mean, again, it's about adjusting to the pain points of each community. Every community has different pain points when it comes to the election. Some people are just like New York City. New York City is just too busy. People are too busy. They don't have to, even though their job gives them an hour may not be enough for them to go and get home to vote. Because they still have to make it to the other job, and the other job is probably off the books, and they can't take the time off or whatever. So you have to look at all these communities individually and say, okay, how are we going to solve that issue here? And that's what I think that the political parties are not doing right. They're not looking at what are the problems, what is keeping people from the polls. That's the poll that they need to do. What kept you from the poll?
Yeah.
And those people need to answer honestly and tell them, like, what is it, so we can fix it.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure that they don't want the bad stuff that comes with them not being present. So those are the types of polls, like the polls of like, oh, you like this one or that one. That's lazy. Again, all of this is lazy. These are lazy metrics. They regurgitate. Like if you look at the newscast from 4 years ago, it's the same newscast over and over again. It's the same thing. It's just like, no, like let's find out what the problems are. Let's find out what the pain points are and address it at the root of the problem instead of just doing the same things over and over again just for ratings or for whatever it is that the news people do. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, but it's about resources, right? So having, channeling the resources to the local level to actually make that happen. And that it has to be, partisan, right?
Yeah, because obviously everybody has a different reason, a different pain
Right,
points.
right,
So
right.
it
But in a
has to
country that's so divided, how do we do it
we have
and
to
do it
take care of
well?
our own. That's really what it
Right,
is. At the
right.
end of the day.
Exactly,
and,
exactly.
and even as an electorate, though, we're so fragmented, right? Every single local, regional state, it does it completely different. No, we don't even have the same type of voting machines. Some people are paper ballots, some people are digital, some people are scanning. And then on top of that, I also feel like there's this sort of delayed response to, like, I honestly think this country didn't see armed guards, like, help stopping people from voting. Like, how do we even plan for that, right? Because I see it sometimes, and it's still like it's a little bit of like shock to me. I'm like, oh, this is happening here. This is the reason, like, so many of our family members left their home countries. It's one of the reasons why I'm a first generation American, and me está pasando ahora. And I think there's a little bit of a disconnect too, and a little bit of like, I can't, like, almost like denial out of self-preservation. So how do you ask a political party to envision that and make, a plan for that, when you can't see, when it's when you almost can't believe it when it's happening right in front of you?
The countermeasure is very simple. You know what a DOS attack is?
No?
It's a
No.
denial of service. Whenever you see a website goes down, like eBay goes down or Google goes down, it's
Mhm.
called a denial of service.
Oh,
And what that is basically when you overwhelm the system with so many requests and so many things that it's impossible to sort them all out, and it just knocks the whole system down. And
okay.
that's what the last administration did. He
Yeah.
did so much illegal stuff that they could take 10 lifetimes to uncover every single thing that he did wrong, and there would never be accountability for everything he did wrong because
It's
he
too much.
overwhelmed the system.
You overwhelm the system.
He overwhelmed the system with, like, I did this, and then my buddy is paying $20,000 for to use my hotel, and I'm billing this to the government, and I'm doing this, and it's just so much, and there's not enough people to actually sort through it. Have you
Right.
ever had a mess in your house that you just dropped, like a box that you took out of your garage, and you just drop that box, and it takes you like an hour to pick up everything?
Yeah.
So imagine somebody doing that to you every single day
For 4 years.
while you're trying to advance the society.
Beyond 4 years, Maria, right? Because it's still
It's
going on.
yeah, we're still dealing with it.
They're still dealing with it, and you're right. We're going to deal with it for a whole lot longer. Can I want to ask you both, closer to home, New Yorkers, right?
Mhm.
About the election there specifically. So Governor Hochul, right? Kathy Hochul is
Yeah.
being challenged by Republican Congressman Lee Zeldin.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not in New York anymore, but I keep tabs on what's going on there. And so over the last few weeks, I've been noticing, Hochul's lead shrink considerably.
Yeah.
And, Zeldin really capitalizing on New Yorkers' concerns about crime, about, increase in the cost of living, about, the flight of the wealthy, quote unquote. Are you all at all worried that Zeldin, who's like a Trump loyalist, might actually win governorship in New York?
I'm petrified, actually.
Yep.
I have a couple of friends who are very active on the political scene. One of them is an activist named Carlos, and he put out a video basically sounding the alarm, going, "We may get a Republican governor." And I'll be honest with you, it wasn't until he panicked that I panicked, and then I was like, "Oh my God," because the repercussions of it, which again, going back to that whole kind of like you almost can't believe it, and even as it's happening, the realization of what would happen to, like, abortion rights in the state, and a whole slew of things didn't kick in until I'm like, I assumed that Hochul would win. Like, we're blue, and then the thought of us not being under a Democratic governor didn't seem real until just now. So now I'm actually terrified.
I mean, and we could look at the mayoral history in New York to see where a Republican mayor has gotten us. It's one of those situations where civil rights and the community progression slows down or comes to a halt,
Yep.
and it's all development and it's all money to displace people.
Mhm.
That's if you look at the Giuliani years, that's what it was, right? It was that's stop and frisk and all the
Yeah.
all the things that we've had to like put in check because it puts our people at risk.
Right.
That's when that thrives. That thrives under a Republican leadership in New York specifically. So yeah, I'm nervous about it. I've been nomadic, so I'm kind of like where you were, Rasma. I'm kind of like I'm halfway in New York and halfway out.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter because New York is a place that I love, and I know how sensitive, I know how fragile the community is as it is
Yeah.
right now, um, and I know that our priorities aren't 100% always in the right place. So our people, sometimes they do it to ourselves. We do it to ourselves in some ways.
Yeah.
So that all those things combined, yeah, it makes it for a scary place. I'm looking at fleeing New York, and that says a lot because I absolutely love New York. I left Puerto Rico once upon a time to be back in New York.
Yeah.
So yeah, to me it's very scary. And it's once a place like New York has that kind of shift,
Hmm.
that's going to be almost impossible to come back from. That's
That's
we're going right back to the Bronx is burning type of situation, with the communities like think about like Brownsville specifically. Brownsville has been a community that's remained significantly unchanged since the introduction of the projects and all the civil rights stuff that was happening back in the days. Brownsville hasn't changed much over the years. There's couple of things popping up here and there, but eventually they're going to wipe it, and they're going to need that kind of a leader. They're going to need a Republican leader to make that happen. To start decommissioning housing projects. To decommission certain programs. They've already done it with science and sports programs in the schools. I mean, I can go on, but New York is very, very fragile right now.
Yeah.
It's very
Yeah.
fragile.
Yeah.
It's going to be feast or famine for a lot of people.
It's going to be what?
Feast or
Sorry.
famine. Either
Yeah.
you're making it or you're not. And you know what happens when people get hungry.
No, claro, claro.
Yeah.
That certainly has me, incredibly worried, and obviously also the migrant and refugee situation in New York City. I'm where New York is an incredibly immigrant friendly, particularly New York City is, very immigrant friendly, and so I'm concerned about what a shift in leadership there would mean also
Yeah.
for that. So our reproductive rights, for housing,
Mhm.
for immigration, for healthcare.
Okay.
So all of it is at stake, back in New York. And my hope is, right, and I'm forever very optimistic that the Latina community in New York will also show up because immigration is one of those important priority issues for us. Do you all think that that's a possibility?
They take it for granted because New York is not like California. California, they have raids every day.
Right.
And they raid places. They go into factories and they put people out. And New York has never really had that. They've had it here and there. It's happened sporadically, but New York doesn't have that culture of people, literally parents not coming home from work one day because there was I'm sorry, what's the naturalization INS raid?
Ice.
Immigration ICE
Nice,
raid.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they. I'm going by the old term from the
Yeah.
naturalization service, whatever. But ICE, ICE raids are not really real in New York. When they did happen for a brief time during the last administration, people freaked out because they're not used to that. They're not
Right.
used to going to work one day and not coming home to their kids. You get what I'm saying? And that's why I think New York doesn't have that. It's not a clear and present danger, I think, to the immigrant community in New York because they never really had that threat looming over them on a daily basis, the way Texas and California and other border towns do.
I think. Well, for me, actually, it was driven home. It was during Trump, and I actually did. I live in a community called Red Hook in Brooklyn, which is really small, right? So we kind of all know each other.
Yeah,
And then I had gotten word that there was an ICE raid,
I
and I
remember that. I
yeah,
remember that.
and I was like, Sari, it was like really early in the morning, and I'm not a morning person. Pero salí, and I immediately was like, I know where the bodega owners are. I know everybody who's Mexican. I know where the building is. It's primarily Mexican Americans. And I was like, get the word out. And I would stop the neighbors. I'd be like, let them know there's an ice raid. We don't know where they're coming. And then God bless my neighbors and all the political activists that we have in this town. The very next day we were pamphleting and we were like warning, and it was like we put the word out. But
I love that about Red Hook. Red Hook has such a strong ally community.
yeah,
Because it's not a secret that Red Hook is has changed significantly with gentrification, but at least the people that are there actually care about some of these issues. So it's a very unique space in Brooklyn than other places in Brooklyn.
and I trust my Latinos, right? So like when I told the bodega owner, I'm like, whoever stops in here, get the word out. And I'm like, I told the neighbor, I was like, go back inside, toca puertas. But
Maria's like Paul Revere.
Yeah.
Llanero Yankee. Llanero Yankee.
Bravo, Maria. That's fabulous.
I remember her telling me the story when it happened. I remember how we were talking about it. So I recall that.
Yeah, the same was going on in Astoria, in Sunnyside, right? It was happening there too, and the locals were definitely out there getting the word out, right, to trying to make sure that families stay together.
But imagine a community like Roseville, right? Like what is that? What's that by Roosevelt Avenue?
Oh, Jackson Heights.
Jackson Heights, yeah.
Corona. Imagine that the whole community. I mean, there's people who've lived there 30 years that never had to speak English because the whole community speaks Spanish.
Yeah.
Like so imagine that threat of just having people come in and cherry pick people out of the community and target them. It's insane. But like I said, to go back to the original question, I think that New York, on that particular issue, they're more likely to zero in on other issues. But I don't think that the New Yorker even, I don't think that they really had that as a clear and present danger. So I don't think that
even though, George, it's so present right now with over 20,000 migrants or refugees there. You don't think that New Yorkers are thinking about that? I mean,
easy to. I'm being honest with you. I mean, when I go into community, they're too busy trying to survive to worry about that. To organize it. I mean, people don't have time. People don't have time. They're literally trying to survive on a day-to-day. The whole thing with the immigration buses coming in and dumping people in different communities has sounded some alarms, I'm sure. But for a person that's been pretty safe in Corona or Roosevelt Avenue for the last 20 years, I don't think that I've even heard people say, I wish they would send me back to my country. No tengo para comprar el pasaje que me manden.
Oh my God.
And I know a lot of people who have gone back. I know a lot of people who banked their money here and they've worked over the years and they've created a net and they're going back.
And my concern is that it is sounding the alarm on the right. They're the ones that are really honing in and being like, this is not what I want for my city.
Of course, because you have these buses, they're dropping the people, now it's going to be full of crime. It's going to, these people are going to take our jobs or whatever. And all the same rhetoric that you hear forever everywhere else, Yeah. So they're on their side. They're like, we don't want this anymore. And the only reason why this is happening is because we have a Democratic governor.
And I think the fundamental issue is that it is, and this is just fun. And we're all here in like communications and marketing and understand, the power of words. It is easier to sow division than it is to sow unity. That's just the bottom line, right? It is easy to rile up the worst and most base impulses in a populace, because that's such a primal, it's fear, it's rage, right? It's all of that terribleness. And it makes it, but to sow unity and connectedness and empathy and compassion, right? And the policies that are rooted in that, it takes more time, it takes more nuanced language, it's harder to disseminate, right? And I think that's what we're up against. But, to echo what you said, I'm like, I'm an optimist, right? And part of that is because soy Latina, and I'm like, but that's the stuff that matters. Because if that's not what we're fighting for, then what the fuck are we doing? Because that's it. That's the point.
That's the point. That's the, sorry, George, that, for the Latina community, it strikes our values, our core values of family, of unity, of community, like all of those things really matter to us in a way that maybe don't matter to to other groups, right? But to us, it does. And so I may be a perpetual optimist, but I really do think that this is going to be a driving force for our community to show up in New York. This, and we were hit really hard by COVID. Y'all know that we did a little short on long-term COVID, right, and the impact that it's having on our community. So healthcare is big. Obviously, energy is big, right? The cost of energy is huge. Childcare is huge. Reproductive rights is another one. So, it's still taboo in our community to talk about. But individually, we care, and we care about the health of our community as a whole. So I do believe that our folks are going to show up.
I do too.
They're going to be driven. They're going to be mobilized to do it.
So my question to both of you, because I know we're running out of time, is what can we share right now to the people that are watching? We were getting, this channel is growing immensely, right? We can't ignore that. You just did 100,000 views in just a couple of days on the platform. What can we say now to that audience, especially that specific demographic that we really need to come out, that younger demographic? What can we say to them right now to kind of inspire them to make sure that they make time for the polls?
I'm going to tell them that, you know how we all line up to go to the Avengers movies and we love that feel-good moment? Like, be a fucking Avenger, man, because this is it. La pelea llegó and we're in it. And please, for God's sake, show up on Tuesday. Do it for your grandparents. Do it for anybody you care about, because it really matters and our lives are on the line. Yeah.
No, I agree, Maria. I am, to quote Michelle Obama, like, oh my God, you've got to vote. That's it, right? That's the way we move forward, is by showing up and voting. And, and John Lewis, like, this is your most powerful tool. Like, we have to use it. And to the young people out there, we've got your back, right? You're not alone in this fight. I have children, I have nieces and nephews, and I'm very focused on what's going to happen with the next generation. And so I feel a responsibility to support, you in this effort to really shift, take this wave and shift it back in a way that really centers racial equity, social justice, healthcare, climate change, reproductive rights, all of it. So I stand with you. So, and if you need me to go and hold your hand while you do it, I'm happy to mobilize some folks to make it happen.
I'm gonna go with Diddy's quote, vote or die. Like,
yes.
Yes.
I know it's a relic from the past or whatever, but I think that the sentiment is real. Like, this is we're fighting for our lives in many different ways, whether it's the life of our children, whether it's the livelihood of our families. Like, it's a life or death struggle right now.
If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review. To catch all the latest from us, you can follow us on Instagram at Tambora Dialogues and on Twitter at Tambora Dialogue 1. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time in the drum circle.